So, anyways, so that is the play in turn kind of a breakdown reaction. So now we're going on to the next part, which we kind of alluded to. Now that we know what the first round is, like we mentioned before, we're gonna kind of just give our predictions for this series. We're not gonna sit here and play out the whole playoffs. Maybe we'll do it in the next episode. But so we got the first round here. Let's just start with a game that's already gone down, because it was a close game regardless. Actually, I'm not going to confuse it. So let's go down. Let's start with the East. The 1-8 Philadelphia Washington Wizards. I'm going with Philadelphia. I'm assuming you are the same. You already kind of alluded to it. How do you stop Embiid if you're Washington? Certainly not with Mo Wagner and undersized Rui Hachimura.
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep it short. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a sweep. I think at best Washington maybe takes game one or two because they're fresh. Well, not fresh, but they're more warm, ready to go. They just played a playoff game. They got the intensity, the adrenaline. But once Philadelphia gets going, I mean, the size that they have, the Washington can't compete.
I will say too before we go forward, I'm curious to see how these 7-8 seeds fare against those 1-2 seeds, just because it's the old argument rest versus rust. Because these
Yep.
other teams have had a week off basically almost, but some of these teams like they're like we'll talk about Memphis later, like they've kind of gone on a hot streak. So if I was one of those teams, I'd be worried about coming out slow, and then so that's just something I'll keep an eye on.
And I
For
would say too, I mean, for specifically like the Jazz, the Lakers, the Nets, some of these teams are having guys coming back
yeah.
from injury, chemistry issues. The Lakers and the Nets, they haven't had their players fully play together. So those series I mean, this first round for those teams is very important, whether it's an easy series or not, because for at least like the Lakers, right? This is the first, real time that Drummond, AD, and LeBron will be playing together. With the Nets, I think Durant, Kyrie, and Harden played like 4 games at most together all year. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how those guys sort of mesh, especially coming off of injuries and rest and playing against these teams who, like the Celtics, have just played a playoff game and Tatum's on a hot streak, or the Suns who have been killing it all year.
Yeah. So, all right. Speaking of the Nets, that's the next series. So sorry, I want to say you said it might be a sweep. I would say either 4 or 5 games for that first series. This
Yeah.
next one, Celtics versus Nets. Obviously, Celtics 7 seed, Nets 2 seed. Um, it's tough, but I think this will go six. I think this will go 6, just because, like you mentioned, we haven't seen them play together, and Tatum's kind of on a hot streak. I don't see how they're really gonna stop. It's gonna be some high scoring games, I think, and that'll just come down to the fact that you don't have Jalen Brown, you don't have that third option like they do, because they obviously have 3 stars. So
Yeah.
it's just tough to hang with that firepower. But I think it's a 6 game series. I think it's one of those things where you know Brooklyn wins maybe game one and or two, and then but the Celtics hold serve at home, and then Brooklyn comes back, wins a crucial game 5, and then Celtics already been in survival mode so long that it can get tiring. So Brooklyn ends up game on at Boston in Game 6. So that'll be my prediction for that. But I do think this will be another one, a fun series to watch.
Yeah, I would say optimistically it goes 6. I'm hoping it does. Some people are talking about how Boston has a chance. Other people on the flip side are saying it's not even close.
And
I
get
think like the
swept.
betting odds on the series, like out of all the Eastern Conference series, I think this is like the highest odds to be a sweep or something like
Oh
that, which
well.
just shows how good the Nets are. Um, yeah, I think Boston takes a game just off of Tatum dominating at some point. Like he drops another 50-point game, and then all it takes is Kemba to have a really solid one. And there you go. Like you can keep up with the Nets. And so I would say they at least sneak one game out that way. I don't think it'll be a sweep. Like I said, optimistically, maybe they take two. But it just feels like Boston before the plane, at least it felt like Boston was just kind of ready for the season to be over. I think that Tatum is not ready for it to be over. Marcus Smart, some of these guys are not ready for that. And so we saw that in that playing game. But you just got to wonder, like at some point, does this Nets team and just the ammo that they have on offense, will it wear the Celtics down? I think it will. And yeah, like you said, not having Jaylen Brown, it's just tough. There's a lack of consistency. The guys coming off the bench, it's just a lot of young guys who haven't been here before. So yeah, I would say it goes 5 or 6. And a sweep is a possibility realistically. I mean, if Tatum doesn't perform, there's no shot the Celtics can win.
Yeah. Alrighty, and the next one. I mean, we already know the Bucks won Game 1, but Bucks Heat. Um, it's a tough one. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go Bucks in 7, just because I feel like this is a Heat team, and I think they're good, but that just seems like they still haven't had a chance to catch their breath collectively as a team due to the shortened off season and everything that happened. I mean, it seemed like this year, especially they didn't start off great, and then they had to really pick it up to get back in the playoffs. I know there's a picture of Jimmy in playoff mode, but Jimmy Butler's one man, and I just feel like Giannis especially knows too, like he can't afford to lose this series, because if he does, then losing to the Heat again, especially it's going to put a damper on his resume, and people are going to have a lot of questions about him as a superstar. So, uh, yeah, I think the Bucks need it more and are going to want it more than the Heat, which I know it's surprising to say because the Heat culture and all that. But just at the end of the day, and then it's hard to go against the Bucks right now. It's not because they won Game 1, too, because I feel like this would be one of those ones they're going to trade back and forth games. But at the end of the day, just this Heat team is just not as good as they were last year. Like we mentioned before, losing Jay Crowder was a huge piece. Just another 3-and-D guy. So going Milwaukee in 7 here against the Heat. What about you?
I think it goes 7 as well, but I'm taking Miami. Um, a large reason to that, and it's a little unfair because we watched Game 1, but I think I'd probably still have taken them regardless of Game 1. Is just the difference in 3-point shooting between the two teams is so immense. I mean, Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo just had horrible games. Like they both went like 5 for 20 or something like that. They were not shooting well. And I got to give credit to Milwaukee because when those guys had the ball, I mean, they sagged off so hard. Like Bam, he could have shot so many mid ranges, and Brook Lopez still would not come out of that paint. So I credit Milwaukee for their defense. But the difference there is that Milwaukee shot like 15% from 3 on the game, and Miami shot like 40% from 3 on the game. So I just think Miami is a lot better at creating those outside shots, even when their interior scoring is not there. And I think for Milwaukee, they're going to have to rely on that interior scoring, which all just starts with Giannis. That's what he does. And I just truly believe in Eric Spoelstra. I think he's easily a top probably 3 coach in the entire NBA. He's just been there. He's done that. He's had teams that were not supposed to make it as far as they did, and they did it anyway. And also just Jimmy Butler, the mentality that he has. I mean, he feels more like that Russell Westbrook mentality, that Jordan, Kobe, those kind of guys that are win at all costs. To where I don't feel like the Bucks have anybody like that, and that's not necessarily like that's not the only way to win, right? Like Steph Curry and the Warriors, they weren't Mamba mentality, but they still dominated. So it's not the only way, but honestly, it also comes down to I think Giannis is the most unclutched superstar in the whole league, and I'd be open to hearing other opinions on that, but it's telling when Chris Middleton is the guy who gets the ball at the end of the games. And that's because Giannis doesn't have a reliable outside shot. He can't really create for himself in the mid range, and he just sucks at free throws. So like, what do you want to do? Like when it's playoff basketball, it's the Miami Heat. They're going to force him to take a jump shot or they're going to foul him. And so I think in these close games, even this first game, he almost choked it. Like he missed a couple free throws at the end there. He ended up missing a layup that was a gimme because Miami didn't want to foul him. And then he had to take a jump shot, got bailed out by a foul. Um, and yeah, and then at the end, Jimmy Butler, he's being guarded by Giannis. There's 3 seconds left, and Jimmy walks into the paint. This is the reigning defensive player of the year who just let him walk in because I think he was scared to foul. I don't know what it was, but yeah, I believe in Jimmy Butler. I believe in Eric Spoelstra. I think that when it comes to these close games, I'm going to give them the edge, which is why I'm taking Miami. Maybe I'm wrong, and this is Giannis's year. But and if they beat the Heat, I'll be impressed. I mean, this is the one team that I think is the hardest out of all these like lower seeded teams, probably besides the Lakers. Um, so I'll be impressed regardless. But I believe a lot more in what I've seen out of Miami, and maybe that's also just bias from previous seasons. But with Milwaukee, I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, understandable. So, all right, so that's our picks for there. And once again, I'm not going to call you crazy because I mean it was very tough. It is for me to pick, but I do feel like we'll go 7 games regardless.
I agree. I agree.
Um, all right, so we already did that. So next one's pretty interesting. Hawks and Knicks. I think this is the last one regardless. 4 or 5 seed at New York. Um, honestly, I think the Knicks win this series in 6. Better defensive team, and like we mentioned before, I just don't feel like playing that James Harden style that Trae Young and Luka kind of play, where it's just high pick and rolls, try to get a switch, and then from there try to draw a foul, or from the it doesn't really work. It doesn't work in the playoff. It's not going to work that way. Um, and regardless, I think New York's a good defensive team, but I think the first 2 games at New York, sold out crowds basically. I mean, this is a Knicks team that's riding a good high, and I think that they'll be able to feed off that energy, something they haven't really been able to do all season. I don't know how the Hawks guard Julius Randle. I will say this is my only concern with picking the Knicks is RJ Barrett. It's been, I mean, I feel like Knicks fans probably been concerned all season about RJ Barrett because when he's solid, they typically win, but there are games where he just is not shooting the ball well. So I think that's a huge key for them. But regardless, I think that the Knicks on both sides of the ball will be able to handle the Hawks. And now, granted, the Hawks are a really good offensive team. They've been rolling. That's why I think that they'll still take at least 2. I wouldn't be surprised if this goes to 7, but I just feel like, especially with Tom Thibodeau, great defensive coach, I think the Knicks will be able to find a way to neutralize Trae Young and win this series. Once again, also shout out to our friend Moses, Knick fan. But what are your thoughts on this series and how it's going to play out?
Yeah, I agree. I'm taking the Knicks. I mean, we've both been critical of the Harden, Luka, Trae Young kind of offensive game plan, and I think out of all 3 of those guys and the systems they run, Trae Young's the one who's the most inconsistent. There's games where the guy will have like 15 points, and in that system, it's just not going to work. There's a reason that Luka and Harden go off for so many points every single time, and that's why they consistently win, is because that's the system. And if they don't do that, they're going to lose. So yeah, I'm taking the Knicks. Also in the playoffs, I feel like I tend to just lean towards whoever's better at defense, and I think there's a stark difference in the Knicks are one of the best defensive teams in the league, and the Hawks are not. So yeah, I'm taking the New York Knicks. I agree with everything you said. Just the momentum that they're riding, the city of New York, the excitement that they have. Also, just like the Hawks coach Nate McMillan, like he had a press conference where he was like, "Yeah, the NBA has like a vested interest in seeing the Knicks succeed in the playoffs," and so like it's just like weird comments that already in his head he's starting to think like, "Oh, we're at a disadvantage because the NBA wants the Knicks to win." So I feel like there's just a lack of even potential self belief in the Hawks organization of like, can they beat the Knicks? And so yeah, I just the defense, the momentum they're riding, Julius Randle, all of these factors. I'm taking the Knicks. I don't know how long the series goes. It could be a sweep. It could go 7. This is the one series that I can't really predict how many games, but I would say realistically probably 6. The Hawks get a few off of like a Trae Young dominant performance and a few other guys chip in. But yeah, I think the Knicks are going to eventually figure it out and win those games.
Yeah, and another thing that I just want to mention that like those comments could also be I don't know why he would say that because the Knicks could also take that as a slight and use that as more ammo and be like, oh, like you think we got here just because the NBA wanted us to? Like, no, dude. Like, I just feel like especially with Tom, I feel like Tom Thibodeau would use that as ammo too. So you're just giving them more ammo to get themselves fired up, and yeah, I don't think that's a smart move by Nick McMillan. And then lastly, just last point too. I believe this is Trae Young's first playoffs, and
Mm-hmm.
for me, size was a concern coming in. Now in the regular season, that's not much of an issue, but come postseason, I mean, we saw it in most of those playing games. It gets to a point where the refs are going to swallow their whistles. They're just going to let the game play, and especially guys, once again, people that are dependent on drawing fouls and getting to the free throw line to put up points, it's not going to be available to you. You're going to have to make some tough buckets where you may get raked, but once again, playoff basketball, they're going to swallow their whistles. So that is just the last concern I have for the Hawks. So that wraps up the East. So now we're going to go on to the West.